Hey, what's up, guys? FLF here. Before we dive in, let's open up with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we ask that you bless this conversation, that you bless this dialogue, Lord, that our pride and our selfish ambitions can be surrendered to you, Lord, myself included, and anyone listening, Lord, that we can dissect the truth for what it is, based on your word, based on what you've shown us through your Son, Jesus, and that we can examine his life and know that it's a reflection of what your intentions are for our lives. I ask that you be with this, those people listening, that those who are listening are blessed abundantly, Lord, whatever strongholds might be in their life. We ask that you break that in the name of Jesus, that genuinely the Holy Spirit can descend upon us to give us that understanding. We ask that you, again, keep your hand over my dialogue, allow my pride to be surrendered, my words to be surrendered, and my tongue to be maintained by the Holy Spirit. We ask all this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. All right, so as we dive into this, one of the videos that I released on Instagram, like a short video of a longer video that I did, you could watch that original one here. But that original video actually ended up getting something right now like 70,000 views. And, a lot of conversation stemmed around it. A lot of controversy kind of developed around this pride flag issue with The Chosen and what it actually means. And even though I'm pretty tired right now, I'm feeling pretty exhausted, I think it's important to go through it. So Dallas Jenkins, who's the co-founder of the show and actually the director, I believe, of the show, made a response to it. And based on Ruslan and his recommendation that I should watch this and give my own response. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. I'm going to try to go through his entire response. I want to be sensitive that his response is about 19 minutes long. And I might not be able to get to every single statement he makes, but I want to cover as much ground as possible. So let's dive in. Let's see what Dallas Jenkins has to say. This is my first time watching this. I've not seen this before, so hopefully we get some good insights as to what the show's co-founder, co-creator has to say about what's been happening.
So number one, here is what you've been hearing, and here's what happens if you go on YouTube and scroll through. You'll see a bunch of pretty hysterical headlines at times. The things like The Chosen waves pride flag on set. The Chosen's all about the money, and they've sold out, and they're trying to please the woke, and The Chosen is promoting yada yada yada.
So I will say I don't think they're doing any of that things. I think this is a more nuanced conversation than, The Chosen has surrendered their entire message and direction and everything to this woke agenda. I don't think that's the case at all. I just want to flag that.
So one of our crew members, one of my favorite crew members actually, an independent contractor. Our crew members are independent contractors, so this would be like if you hired a crew to come build your home or paint your office space. He has a 3-inch pride flag on his own personal equipment. He has it on every project that he works on. He's had it on his equipment on our project for over a year. He's been with us for a while. And it happened to show up in the corner of one of our behind-the-scenes videos.
It's interesting that he said, one of the crew members and one of his favorite crew members. I think that's an interesting take because I definitely don't think that we should be in a situation where we stand in opposition to anyone of any community or of any nature. But if he was one of your favorite crew members, and if you guys did resonate, it seems like he would have more respect, I think, for what the show is about, what the Christian approach and walk is about, and have a level of respect for that. But it doesn't seem that to be the case, right? So just interesting that he threw that in there, one of my favorite crew members.
Someone asked about it, which isn't the first time we've been asked about things like that, at least maybe even that specifically in the past. And we violated our own rule about responding on someone else's turf, and we ended up giving kind of a standard answer that we give when asked about our cast and crew's personal beliefs, which we get asked about all the time. And that was a mistake because this issue is a little bit more nuanced than just a standard, what does your cast and crew believe answer.
Interesting. Yeah, I did notice that as well. The fact that the question was asked, The Chosen responded, and I think the response was a little bit knee-jerk, based on what they said. And that was kind of the crux of the last video as well, that their response was kind of an interesting response, and it was a surprising response, to say the least. Shout out to Dallas Jenkins for owning that, because I think that is a mistake, and I think there is nuance that exists. And I think they should have approached that a little bit differently than they did.
So to be clear, there was no flag flown. A 3-inch flag doesn't fly anyway. And there's been no statement made by The Chosen about Pride or Pride Month or anything like that. There's no promotion of anything happening, unlike some of the headlines and some of the hysterical rantings we've seen. Now, again, not everyone who comments on this is hysterical. I'm not saying that. Many of you have very legitimate and fair questions. I'm just saying that when you look on social media, you're always going to be shown the most engaging and eye-catching and clickbaity headlines, and it's, I'm sure, going to throw you off sometimes and cause some confusion. So in our now or never, all or nothing times, this turned into a bit of a culture war, kind of an intra-Christian culture war. And
I think it's less, and just to respond to that statement that we're in a now or never time, I think that has to have a little bit of weight to it, because when you say it's not now or never, right? Or if you say that it's all or nothing, if you say it's not all or nothing, to me, one thing that stands out to me is that there is compromise. Now, compromise isn't always a negative thing, right? We can compromise in many ways as Christians in a positive way, where we say, okay, if we're going to reach X amount of people, we will exclude certain things from our message this time around for this audience. Or if, I'm speaking to kids, I'm not going to share maybe the most grisly testimony ever. I'm going to do something that's a little bit different to try to reach them where they're at in that moment, right? And I think compromise is a part of the Christian walk. But I think there's a level of compromise when beliefs meet and when sin can be outwardly kind of addressed, right? So this idea where it's all or nothing, I think we are living in such a time where we have to be so clear about our beliefs and about our distinct beliefs as Christians in these times where there's no gray area for compromise. I don't think there's any room for lukewarmness. And especially in this age of like liberal Christians, where Christians are kind of like Jesus is all loving, God is everything, kind of new agey style beliefs. I don't think there's room for a gray area. And I think it's important that we kind of address these things and call it out for what it is. At the same time, I think there is room for a Christian to approach the situation, to ask a very concerned question, and to expect a diligent response. And if the response isn't where we need it to be, I think it's okay to push on that a little bit more. I don't advocate for anyone calling names or attacking people or tearing people down or anything like that. But I think we can say, hey, that's not a sufficient response given the type of undertaking with this show that you've brought on. But again, just a thought here as we kind of, because that's interesting. He said, in this all or nothing time, we're at the end of times, man. This is all or nothing.
And we're getting compared to companies that actively promote whatever woke agenda that people are concerned about. So on our set, just to be clear, this is nothing new. Like I said, we've had for a long time, our cast and crew have wildly different beliefs. They run the spectrum. And they sometimes wear T-shirts or hats that go across the entire spectrum, from a pride flag or a MAGA hat or a Jesus Saves shirt. And no one's been triggered. No one on our set minds. Everyone loves our fellow cast and crew members, including the overwhelming majority of our visitors and like our extras, our background extras who come in and see all of this stuff. And
I don't think there's any really equation to a Jesus Saves shirt to a MAGA hat or a pride flag. I'm just going to say that I don't think there's any equation. I think having a Jesus Saves shirt on a Christian set for a Christian show should be expected. I really wouldn't be that thrilled to see a MAGA hat on the Chosen set either, but I would feel a little bit differently than a pride flag. I think that says more about the sin in your life and the advocacy for your sin in your life and the pride that you have in that. Whereas, maybe a MAGA hat could be taken a lot of ways depending on the political aisle you're on, but even advocacy for a political group, I'm not a fan of that either. I might ask the same question if I saw that as well.
Unless people are jerks or don't work hard, we are a huge, we're a family. We're very tight-knit on set. Everyone loves the experience. And our personal policy has always been that we don't police individual workspaces or social media. So when we bring on independent contractors like our cast and crew, just from the beginning, Amanda and I, when we first started The Chosen, and my partner Daryl and others, we've just made it very clear to each other, to our cast and crew, and to you actually, that we do not have a religious or political litmus test for who we hire, and we also do not police individuals' social media or their own personal workspaces, like their own gear, their own equipment, their own T-shirts. And we just made that decision years ago. I'll explain why in a little bit. But our cast and crew can say what they want on social media, and as long as they are not harming anyone else on set, kind of the usual rules of everyone just kind of respecting each other, they're their own person.
I wonder why they don't have a religious litmus for this incredible undertaking that has millions and millions of dollars being put towards it. And I'm not even saying that everyone who's working on it has to be a sold-out believer, but you would think, respectfully, there's not other camera creators who are believers or who have beliefs that better align with what the show is about that aren't advocating for pride flags or for Pride Month, that kind of thing. I don't entirely understand that. Like, obviously, we don't want to police the social media accounts, but the idea that there's no, as he's calling it, a religious litmus, or even just a standard interview to say, look, this is what we're producing the show about. What are your thoughts on that? If push comes to shove, like, where do you stand on these beliefs? I think that's fairly fair, especially if you're hiring contractors, you're not hiring full-time employees. I don't know all the rules and regulations, and mind you, I don't want to be over here talking about things that can get people in trouble from an employment standpoint, but it's kind of an interesting comment that he made there.
And even in this last week, some of our cast said some things online that I wouldn't have said, and we talked about it, and I just said, you can say what you want, but I think, here's examples of wisdom that we could practice, and but that's just how we've operated from the beginning. So this particular issue this week, this is not our problem. We're doing the same thing we've always done. It's a philosophy we've had all along. We've communicated it repeatedly. Our visitors and whatnot see it when they come. In fact, when we filmed the feeding of the 5,000, some of our crew members, in fact, one of our crew members had this pride flag on his own personal equipment then too. So there's nothing for us to do about this because I don't change my mind based on responses. But there's nothing for us to do but repeat what we've already said.
What's funny is that, you had a lot of cast and crew members kind of come out in support of this particular production crew member and their beliefs. So not even just the person themselves, which I could kind of understand more. Hey, so-and-so is a great person. They've always been very kind to us. Let's be respectful of them. Nothing like that, but more so that the fact that Christians are showing their homophobia and I forget the exact words. I don't want to misquote anyone. I'll put the tweets on the screen, but that Christians are kind of showing their homophobia and these different things, and that love is love, based on some of the primary cast and crew who are in the show. And he's like, we don't control it. We don't police it. They're going to say what they want to say. Okay. And I think that's fine, but that hits on the point I was making originally in my video, where it's less about, hey, the chosen, you guys should control all of this super tight to make it is what it is. I'm more so concerned about, if the telling of Jesus is going to be told authentically, you should have people who are on set, who are involved in the production, that authentically, to some degree, know scripture and know Jesus. And if they don't, how can we authentically tell the story? We kind of keep going back to this idea of authentically telling the story. How can we do that when there's people whose beliefs don't align? And then that pride flag, had that never been a conversation, had that never been something that had come up, had that never been a polarizing topic, you wouldn't have advocacy not only spreading from that pride flag, but also to the cast and the crew who are kind of coming out in support of this thing, which we know as Christians and believers, something Jesus would 100% not agree with. In the same way that Jesus would agree with drunkenness or idol worship or using the Lord's name in vain or stealing or lying. In the same way that Jesus isn't supporting these other types of sin, he wouldn't support this either. So why do you have the cast and the crew feeling the need to kind of defend the beliefs, not even the individual, mind you, but the beliefs themselves of this particular person? And I mean, Dallas is trying to, cover himself in this situation to say, hey, we talk to them, we don't police things, our policies are the same. Okay. All right. Your policy is the same. I get it. But the point that I was making in my earlier video was less about the chosen being a monolith and controlling everyone's behavior on set like Disney or something when they're producing one of their shows, and more so what this is resulting in. And we're getting there's cracks in the foundation, right? There's people that don't share the beliefs that we share. There's people that don't understand the story of Jesus the way that the story of Jesus should be understood, who are telling it. And I think that's really the problem there.
Okay. I mean, again, like I said, this is not the first time, and I just don't make decisions based on disagreements or how people might respond. That said, here is a refresher. Now, before you turn off the video because you go, that's it, I knew it, they're not going to apologize, they're not going to change their mind, and they're wrong, and I'm done. That's fine. But here's a refresher on things we've said before, and maybe some little clarifications on things we haven't said yet. Number one, and this is very important, we are not a church. We are not a nonprofit. We're not a ministry. We're not any kind of religious or political organization. Now, the content itself can be ministerial, of course. And even the term Christian production, I've heard that thrown around. Again, I haven't been paying much attention to social media, but my team has been obviously asking me some questions about how to respond. And I've heard the term on a Christian production, you shouldn't XYZ. I'm not exactly sure what that term means, to be honest. Now, don't let that scare you.
A Christian production means that you are telling the most important story ever told that millions of people are going to watch and consume, that's been funded by millions of Christians giving millions of dollars, and it's for the sole purpose of accurately telling the story of Jesus. So there is a weight of responsibility that Dallas has to take on. There is a weight of responsibility that the cast and the crew have to take on. You don't step into this lightly. This is not just making a show for kids or a show that's Christian adjacent, that has good values and good themes. You are telling the most important story ever told in the history of the universe. We have to get it right. And I don't think everyone on set should necessarily be a Christian, but we are seeing the responses coming out of the cast and crew that don't align with doctrinal beliefs. And chances are it's overwhelmingly the opposite is true. But I don't like Dallas playing dumb here. I don't like this. Why? Lord, forgive me. I don't want to take an attack at this person because I know he's trying genuinely, but why is he saying I don't know what that word means? You know what it's implying. You know what the idea is. We're not, and maybe in some cases, we're not saying that every single person needs to be a diehard, Jesus loving, 100% committed, sold out Christian. But obviously what you're doing is telling the most important story ever told in the history of the universe. You got to get it right. And when you've been funded by donations, when you've been funded by Christians, I've given money to The Chosen, and I know many Christian brothers and sisters who've also done the same. When they're giving you their money, there's a standard and an expectation that comes with that, and you can't be ambivalent about that. You must know that standard exists.
Can a production be Christian? The content can, of course. I mean, we're a show about Christ, so we're probably one of the most Christian content in history because we are about Christ, who's in the word Christian. But the production itself, the equipment, the crew, the team, the set, I mean, we film all over the place on different sets, and we work with different vendors, and we don't have any kind of corporate policy about statements of faith or anything like that. We don't have corporate prayer.
You don't, but you should. Let me show you should. If you don't, you should. I would say you should.
Second important point that kind of guides some of our principles on this. Solomon built the Holy Temple. I mean, this is the Holy Temple of God. And the labor and the materials, many of them came from what's described in the Bible as pagan nations, pagan workers. He got help. And when he asked the king, I believe, the king of Tyre, I don't remember how to pronounce it, he referenced David, that David had done the same thing. And this is the Holy Temple. It was built by what the Bible describes as pagans. People, but let's maybe not use the word pagans, let's just use the word people who strongly would disagree with Solomon or David in their spiritual practice.
The Holy Temple was not built by pagans. The Holy Temple was built by Jews and Israelites, and Solomon enlisted the aid of all of these different nations to provide materials and shipping and paid them well for it. Let's also keep in context that when Solomon was a king, many of these nations that he was extracting materials from were subservient to the nation because David had conquered all of the nations. And on top of this, again, the people that created the temple, that ministered in the temple, that did the work in the temple and assembled the temple were the tribe of Levi. And I'm going to put some scripture on the screen so we can kind of reference that. This is not a one-to-one comparison. And on top of that, like, dare I say that the work that Solomon was doing with the temple is not in many ways nearly as important as expanding the gospel of Christ. Both very important. But the work that we have to do now is a much more important and much more critical work than even what Solomon was doing. And Jesus even said that in 3 days, I'll destroy this temple and build it up anew. And that sounded so radical, but he was talking about his body and talking about the church and the living God. So I don't see a comparison here. And I think it's a weak argument to kind of present that. I think it's a very weak argument. Respectfully.
This is another important point, and one of the main reasons why I have this philosophy, why I came into the show having this philosophy, because oftentimes the roles have been reversed. I've seen, it's happened both ways, but I've seen it also where Christians aren't allowed to express themselves at work or on sports teams, or when bosses force their employees to wear a certain thing, put on a patch, line up for some sort of cause, and or resist one of their employees doing it. And I would imagine that if you were an employee at a place that had different beliefs than you do, and you wanted to show up and have a crucifix or a Jesus Saves sticker or something on your own personal workspace, and they said, no, you can't do that, I don't want you to do that, you're triggering someone else or whatever, you would, I would imagine, be not happy with that. We've seen that happen before, and people complain about it, and people protest it when they see it happening. And I would agree with that. I don't like that either. I think that's wrong. And so because I believe that that's wrong, even when the roles are reversed, then I would believe that it's wrong in my case, even if I disagree with something that someone may wear or post. Now, that said, we just agreed from the beginning, Amanda and I just said that this is going to be our philosophy. Now, if we were a church, or if in the description I provided, you're working for a political organization or something that has in its bylaws and as a...
Yeah, but if I'm in a workspace with a company that I know advocates for it and they call me to advocate for it, I would excuse myself, dismiss myself, or put my head down and focus on the work that I knew I needed to do and minister to people quietly. But at the end of the day, if I was to do one of those things, the reason that I'm doing it is to call for advocacy. So when a Christian does it, it's a very clear message and a very clear mission as to why they're doing it. The opposite on the other side of the scale is true as well. There's a reason they're putting the pride flag. There's a reason that they're trying to broach a discussion about it. There's a reason that they want this known because they want to talk about it. They want to advocate for it. They want to win people to their side of the argument. And at the end of the day, if I'm wearing a Jesus hat, I'm inviting conversations, and hopefully good, sometimes bad, but I'm inviting conversations because I want to discuss the gospel. I want to share the gospel. The same is true for the opposite side of the fence. So yes, if you're working in a certain company, they're not going to allow you to do that because they don't want that in their workplace. I might not agree with it, but it's the reality. why can't you do the same thing? And you've expressed that already around the contractors, around the statement of faith, why you don't necessarily do it. Okay, that's fine. But the reality is that you could if you wanted to. And despite the kicking and screaming, whatever it might be, you have people like Dave Ramsey, who's not the gold standard, but telling people they can't have premarital sex based on their work environment. I think he's going through a lawsuit right now with it. That seems extreme to me, as a Christian, to have a whole workplace where we sign this moral belief clause that you can't do that. And he doesn't seem like the nicest person always, just to be honest. So the fact that he's willing to do it, and he's not telling the story of Jesus, he's just talking about financial literacy, I think we could do it as well.
Number 4 in the list of important points. Look, here's the thing when it comes to our cast and crew and my own beliefs and philosophies. I'm not an atheist, and neither is the production company an atheist. But I'm happy to work with those who are, if they are working hard for the show. And I don't police their social media. I don't. My company won't make any kind of formal statement about atheism, speaking out against atheism. Any disagreements I have with them would be discussed privately, and in the context of relationship and love. The content of my show speaks for itself, and the content of my show may end up, of course, disagreeing with atheism. But in terms of our personal relationships on set, it's just not something that we discuss publicly. I'm not a Catholic. Neither is the Chosen Inc. Catholic. I'm not a Mormon. Neither is the Chosen Inc. Mormon. I'm not a Buddhist or
Yeah, you're not Catholic. You're not Mormon, but you have a partner who's Latter-day Saints, and the actor portraying Jesus is Catholic. And I think that's why he said that, because even though you might not be one of these things, again, this kind of draws back to everything. It's like one foundational crack, another one, another one, another one. If we haven't placed Jesus as our cornerstone and the foundation of our faith, everything else is going to crumble. And if you're allowing more and more people to kind of step in, be involved in something, for better or for worse, whatever their intentions are, the reality is the authenticity of the story of Jesus is going to get watered down, and people are going to be impacted, and the message is going to be impacted as a result. You must have known this when you saw the line that Jesus said being pulled from the Book of Mormon. Whether intentional or not intentional, the reality is that is too close for comfort. And if you hadn't had a Mormon co-founder or Latter-day Saints involved, whether it was on sets or production, I don't think anyone would have raised an eyebrow at that. But the fact that you did raise an eyebrow, no one would have raised an eyebrow had you, had an actor who wasn't Catholic portraying Jesus, but you do. And that same actor is promoting the Hallow app. That same actor is inviting you to meet the Pope, for example. These are things that are concerning to Protestants. And the reality is, Dallas, that you have a responsibility. It's weighted on your shoulder. So when we see someone on set that has a pride flag, those same kind of questions come up because they've come up multiple times in different ways. It's not isolated to this one incident, which I think and I think you're very well trained around how to approach this, how to address it. But let's just call it for what it is. The reality that you're, mentioning certain things or addressing them, and you've addressed other controversy in the past. That's why people are concerned. That's why these things keep coming up. It's not about the content that produces. Oh, well, we made the show. Obviously, we're not atheists. Obviously, maybe we don't believe in, certain beliefs that this community shares. The show will speak for itself. The show might speak for itself, and it also might speak for other people as well who are involved. And that's just the reality, because it feels like it already kind of has. So I think what he kind of ended up going into there at the end is pretty much, if you're not watching The Chosen, it's because of these reasons, not necessarily because I've covered all these other reasons, is more or less what he said. But he didn't address the reasons that I kind of brought it up. And, in that short form video content, it's hard to hit on all the points that you might want to hit on. And I am mindful of that. At the same time, though, I think the points that I've raised still stand, and I don't think that they've been addressed in this video, in this response, and he might not ever respond to them, and that's okay. But I think the reality is, in the end times, we're going to have false prophets and false Christs. What's interesting about this scenario, and something that's made me think, is like, when we think about that term, false Christ, I always took that as a literal false Christ, a literal person who was performing like false miracles, demon-led miracles, winning people away after false doctrine. And what this has kind of made me realize is that a false Christ can be a false Christ portrayed in the media. It could be a false Christ portrayed in a TV show. It could be a false Christ that is conjured up by the viewers or by the people creating the show, and we could consume it and take that as a true Christ. But as you watch and as the show progresses and evolves, ends up becoming something that is totally different than what the reality of Christ is. And that's something that hit home for me, because it's not something I've ever considered, that the false Christ could be a false Christ that we've consumed through a TV show like The Chosen. Again, I'm not saying that that's the case here, but when you have these cracks, when you have them keep coming up over and over, it does cause concern and it does raise a flag. And I don't think Dallas has really addressed the primary concerns that I've had, which is fine. I'm not like the end all be all, right? But I didn't make this video as a hysterical sort of response. I didn't call anyone by any sort of name. I didn't attack or tear down any community, but I addressed what I think are the real concerns and the ongoing concerns with this and what we're probably going to see more and more of. I respect the idea that, he's willing to fight for his cast and his crew. I think that's admirable. I think that is an appropriate Christ-like response to the situation, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think this approach is going to be enough. And, hopefully God will continue to lead this and be able to turn it into something amazing, because I think it could be. But with that in mind, guys, I'm going to cut this video off. I don't want to eat up too much time. It's late here and I'm spent. It's been a long day. But thank you so much for watching. If you felt this is going to bless you or bless somebody else, please share it with somebody and just allow it to penetrate the hearts and minds of those listening. Thank you so much again for watching. Again, it's FLF, and let's continue to light up Babylon. God bless.